called black metal music and encourages devil worship and the desecration of churches.
When I heard it, almost a cold shiver goes down your spine. What is all this about?
The ban, a form of music, they say, has disturbing satanic overtones.
Become almost absorbed in it.
Welcome to Blackfold, a black metal podcast. My name is Danny van Eyck. I've been fascinated by black metal for decades. Not so much by the music at first, but all the more by the tales behind it, the mythology, the villainous characters who inhabit both the music and the scene, the constant pushing of boundaries, whether they were musical, in the embrace of evil, or through the actual crimes, the arsons, kidnappings, torture, even murders. It never ceased to amaze me how many extreme things happened in such a relatively small scene. However, it never did much to warm me to the actual music. That was until September of 2021, when my family suffered a terrible loss. The mourning period following this, weirdly enough, I spent going down the black metal rabbit hole. I started listening to the classics. I read up on bands, spent hours, days, weeks, and then months digging ever deeper into a seemingly endless catalog of blast beats, tremolo picking, and maniacal screams. I enjoyed lo-fi recordings, and I was blown away by the more high-fidelity releases. I had found a project to take my mind off of the grief, and I was thankful to have this music become the lifeline that it turned out to be. This podcast is my attempt at sharing my newfound fascination, and dare I say it, even love for this music. It is a scattershot approach at examining some of the pillars of the genre, delving into some of the key players of its past, its present, and its future, going over some of the themes of the music, and of course, diving into some of the more extreme things that define black metal's history. And although this history is indeed a defining feature of the genre, and an important element of this podcast, I also want to look at today's music, as well as the future of the scene. I don't want this to be a repeat of things people know about intimately already, but there are certain relatively well-known stories that deserve to be talked about all the same. Today, I want to talk about something that is often completely overlooked in this particular music scene. And although it is reasonable, it is also a horrible oversight. So let's take a step back first. A step of about 480 years, and to some of the most evocative words ever committed to paper. She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools, the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale, told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. For those unfamiliar with the bard's work, these are the morning words of Macbeth, spoken directly upon learning of his wife's passing. These are only 12 lines, just 12 lines of only 90 words, many of them repeating. But these 90 words are so full of despair, so full of misery and heartache. They give voice to life's futility and relay so much of the dread of the finite nature of existence that it is no wonder that close to 5 centuries after they were written, they are still some of the most quoted lines of poetry today. Of course, Shakespeare captured lightning in a bottle a lot more often, and the timelessness of his subjects makes his words still ring absolutely true, even in 2025. And whether he talked love, honor, or kinship, whether he invoked pain, loss, betrayal, or murder, he was able to put into words such feelings with peerless elegance and eloquence. And if he found that words were not fitting, then he invented words that did. Before the Swan of Avon put quill to parchment, we made do without words such as gossip, hurry, gloomy, suspicious, obscene, cold-blooded, zany, worthless, critic, and even kissing and bedroom were not in use before he put them in writing. We would have never been sent on a wild goose chase, nor would we visit brave new worlds. And we would have not used phrases such as "that's Greek to me" or "good riddance." All in all, Shakespeare has been credited with inventing over 1,700 words, or at least with being the first to put them to writing, and many of them still are in common use today. His writing has been of such importance to Western culture that it not only reshaped our language, but it even reshaped our outlook on matters of war, death, piety, and love. They personalized the conveyor and recipient of such emotions and became of great importance for the coming about of individualized society. In effect, his writing changed humanity. Of course, such matters not only happened in Western Europe, as all over the world cultures can point to men and women of equal or close to equal importance. Figures that were so impactful that they not only changed the trajectory of their respective fields, but whose output was essential to the development of society. Chikamatsu Monzaemon of 17th century Japan comes to mind, as do Leonardo da Vinci, Confucius, Muhammad Ali, Mark Twain, Jane Austen, John Muir, Gaudi, Ansel Adams, even Coco Chanel. All of them in one way or another rose above their field in such a way that they impacted our entire species on a much grander scale than should have been possible, and we're all richer for it. But words matter, and prose, poetry, and lyrics have been a driving force in change, or in opposite, reinforcement of ideas and traditions. They have made claims to conformity, have led to rebellion, have expressed love and grief in manners that have changed the way we confront our own feelings and emotions. At Blackfold, being a music podcast, we tend to focus a lot on the notes, tempos, and sounds of the scene. And although vocals play an enormous and very distinctive role in black metal, the things that are sung about often get disregarded out of hand. And that is not strange, considering three things. 1. A lot of the screams are very hard to make heads or tails of. I mean, can anyone decipher this? Two, black metal is extremely international and many artists write in their mother tongue. And 3, the scene had a weird start with imagery and lyrics mostly sticking to a very narrow scope of horror and devil worship, and then often morphed into reactionary dipshittery. But believe me when I say that there is beauty, or at least good poetry, to be found in this scene, and even though Shakespeare once wrote, "You are to wait, though waiting so be hell," I bid you to do so anyway. Everything here is so cold. Everything here is so dark. I remember it as from a dream, in the corner of this time. Likely, these are the most famous lyrics in the entire scene. Its author is Per Olin, whom we talked about at length in our first episode. It is stark, simplistic, and harsh. Not even its broken English hurts its imagery. If ever there were lyrics that relate the scene's foundation, then the words "to freezing moon" are the ones. Alienation, depression, cold, death, and darkness have been mainstays of the scene since its inception, and Freezing Moon, in its mere 91 words, set a standard for a scene. Or, if you want to be less generous, dug a hole that generations of lyricists have been unable to escape from. Not that there's anything wrong with maintaining a link to the past, but the scene, conservative as it can be, was not a breeding ground for original ideas, at least not so much during its beginning. However, what it lacked in innovation, it more than made up for in its evolution of hate and angst-filled poetry, and over time the lyrical darkness and despair led to an offshoot in an entire subgenre. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them? To die? To sleep? No more. And by a sleep to say we end. The heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation, devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Ay, there's the rub, for in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. Of course, there's a famous Shakespeare quote that fits. There somehow always is. Hamlet, because of course that is the source of these famous lines, is among the bard's most famous works, and its titular character's ruminations on depression, death, misery and suicide are as heartfelt as those that the black metal scene adopted in the depressive suicidal subgenre. And this particular part of the story is a strong contender for Shakespeare's most quoted lines, and they've become so ingrained in our collective memory that we instantly conjure up the image of the prince cradling the skull of dead court jester Yorick in his palm, staring into its empty eye sockets while uttering them. In fact, it is so powerful that famed Polish composer and pianist Andrzej Tchaikovsky bequeathed his skull to the Shakespeare Company to serve as a stage prop after his death, and it has been used as such in a large number of performances. Chief among them a run of the play in Stratford-upon-Avon, in which actor David Tennant, as Hamlet, played up against the Polish skeletal remains, as well as a run of West End performances in the capital of the UK. Its imagery and words remain ever powerful, and I see no end to that anytime soon. Invincible insanity, on life, not meant for here, never ending the sound, rope creaking in my night, the eyes of specters which call to me, reflecting every movement to die. Leviathan is a one-man band fronted by Jeff Whitehead, and to say that he is a controversial figure would be to sugarcoat it. Convicted for domestic battery and accused of even worse, he nonetheless has released a number of amazing albums. Most famous among them is 2003's debut, The 10th Sublevel of Suicide, a concept album about the ultimate self-harm, which Whitehead, a tattoo artist by trade, described as It is about different phases, levels of contemplation towards an action, the act of self-extermination. All the lyrics, with the exception of two, are about suicide in one form or another. Depressive suicidal black metal, or DSBM for short, tackles its subject in a much less roundabout way than initiators like Dead and Fenris did. It foregoes the haunted visions of forests and medieval strife for a direct gut punch of pure misery. Bands like Leviathan, Xaster, Shining, and Life Lover are responsible for some of the most nihilistic, misanthropic, and bleak lyrics ever committed to music, and even though they are an acquired taste, they can, in their confrontational manner and no-holds-barred content, be quite transcendent. Take Xaster's verse on Screaming at Forgotten Fears, for instance, to see how melancholy, pain, and suffering can be worded to such an extent that it transcends its inherent negativity. A sinister telepathy is screaming at forgotten fears. An exit made of your self-destruction. May your reflection guide the blade. In your lost code of self-knowledge, a mere entrance for evil to enter. The venom is hidden, and the venom wears a mask. I serve myself upon the wings of pain's afflictions unto thee. Disconnect from my state of being, and without a trace, it was my soul that murdered yours. That murdered yours. Still, this is a hard subgenre to delve into at times. So what else is there to lighten the mood somewhat? Ah yeah, good old Mother Nature. Now, my co-mates and brothers in exile, hath not old custom made this life more sweet than that of painted pomp? Are not these woods more free from peril than the envious court? Here feel we not the penalty of Adam, the season's difference as the icy fang and churlish chiding of the winter's wind, which when it bites and blows upon my body, even till I shrink with cold, I smile and say, this is no flattery. These are counselors that feelingly persuade me what I am. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. And this, our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. Duke Senior sure knows how to make light of his and his courtiers' exiles to the forest of Ardennes. His brother Frederick forced him to live in the woods in the wonderful play As You Like It, and I found it fitting for its comparison to black metal, in that it touches upon a number of shared elements. The icy fang of winter, the chiding of the wind, but also the beauty in nature, in dangers and treasures alike. Remind me of the scene's beginnings. The icy cold of the Norwegian sound and lyrics, and the everything here is so cold of it all. Memory in dissipation, like the hoarfrost's delicate cling. The supplemental envelopment of winter's prosthetic embrace. In exchange for the fire's warmth, I delve into memory. Nostalgia replaced hope as reality replaces dreams. The spruce, snow-weighted, as my troubled heart succumbs to burden. The saplings crushed beneath the snowfall as my recollection is obscuring. In whitewash, I'm saturated and satiated by its allure. The nothingness drowns out the loss known before this frozen world. Kentucky's Panopticon always marched to the beat of their own drum. Not surprisingly, Austin Lund, the only full-time member of the band, has a feel for folk music and folk tales without ever delving into the realm of folk metal. Yet its lyrics touch upon the same themes as the music of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, albeit in a more roundabout and often more poetic manner than the more straightforward social commentary of the past. Nature, life in rural America, laborers' plight and harsh conditions all play a role in the band's music, and often the elements do too. Snow and moss, wind and trees, light and darkness, and sometimes the songs themselves are just that, folk songs. And in this particular one, we hear an old acquaintance.
The devil walked the woods this morning, drifting through the mist, pleased with his deeds, beside a serpent's hiss. The barren grounds, the snowless winters brought him a wry smile. Decayed remains of long dead spruce were strung about in files. He strode aside the oil sheen dress, woodland lake shores.
Hi, Danny here. Just a quick thank you for listening to our podcast. We are happy to know that people are listening to the content we've created, and we truly hope that you are enjoying it. Making an hour-long weekly podcast is a pretty time-consuming side job, but it is one we love to do. However, that is something that I myself pretty much took for granted when listening to other podcasts. Hours upon hours of research go into writing one of these episodes, and our editor and producer then spend a lot of time checking my stories and then making them somewhat listenable for you. So what do we ask in return? Nothing. This show is free, and it will remain free forever. We believe in putting out a quality product that is enjoyable for almost everyone. However, we did set up a Patreon for the show, and if you can afford it, then we would welcome your patronage. But only if you can afford it. We have not planned anything specifically for patrons, and we are not eager to do so, as we do not believe in making our content exclusive to people who are able to pay for it. But we do welcome any donations you wish to make. So, you can head on over to patreon.com/Blackfold podcast and leave us a small tip if you want to. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review anywhere you can. And now, back to the podcast. The devil can cite scripture for his purpose. An evil soul, producing holy witness, is like a villain with a smiling cheek. A goodly apple, rotten at the heart. Oh, what a goodly outside falsehood hath. The Merchant of Venice remains divisive. A lot of people put forward that its depiction of the moneylender Shylock is extremely problematic, and that the play's anti-Semitic character has harmed Jewish people for more than 4 centuries. In fact, it was an absolute stage favorite in Nazi Germany, where actors really hammed up its inherent prejudices. They really laid into the greed, the conniving and bloodlust of Shylock. But others have made claims that the play is way more sympathetic of the man's plight, and that it's more interested in the combined humanity of its characters. Whichever side you fall on, the devil makes a number of appearances in Shakespeare's plays, but only ever in mentioning. Unless, of course, you're one of the believers that Saiton in Macbeth is a stand-in for the Horned Lord, but perhaps that is too long a bridge to cross in this episode. Out here in the beast's domain, through a gloomy, dreary forest, angels run. Angels fly away from my young graveyard. I stand under a cold wind. The roof is lifting from the angel's flight, and I drink from the cold of the moon, pale lights, and pay homage to Satan's son. A cruel evil seeps in and fills body and soul. A sky of killings, torture, and hatred. Dark Throne. Originally in Norwegian, Skald of Satan's Soul deals with satanic imagery in a way that the scene has been obsessing over ever since its inception. And as we discussed in episode 2, to greater extent, the satanic angle has remained a staple of the genre. Some people going so far as to name it a prerequisite for black metal. Satanism, or the occult, is of course a deep well with many layers and depths, and we see that reflected in the contents of our favorite music. It ranges from the childish, we are possessed by the moon. We are possessed by evil. We are possessed by Satan. Possessed by Satan. And then we rape the nuns with desire. That was Possessed by Satan by Gorgoroth, and I would rate Infernus's poetic capacity at the same level as his treatment of women. The guy did jail time for rape. But on the other side of the spectrum, Satanism can invoke well thought out and existential lyrics as well. Take Witch Club Satan, for instance. Did you smell the pine woods burning? Did you see the bloody air? O unenred pa redir, with fire, fire in her hair. Dear fire, light my spirit, and tie our hearts with fiery strings. Fertilize our mortal bodies, hellbound flowers, golden wings. Now, and I need to emphasize this as much as possible, if you do not know Witch Club Satan, you need to get over their silly name and dive into their debut album as quickly as possible. Not only because their lyrics are great, even though they're able to make a song about menstruation about as hard-hitting one as possible, but because they are just awesome. But I'm certain we will find a way to talk about them more in a future episode. Of course, whenever Satanism crops up, so does its counterpart, or rather its extension, or rather the thing it is extended from. Of course, I'm talking about religion. Stay, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, here thou go. Give up thy staff. Henry will to himself. Protector be, and God shall be my hope, my stay, my guide, and lantern to my feet. And go in peace, Humphrey, no less beloved than when thou wert protector to thy king. Henry V was a devout Catholic and a true warrior king. Although he only reigned for a short period, he was seen by most as a just and righteous king. His reign was cut short by his untimely death from dysentery in Paris. Shakespeare grew up in a different England, one that was now Protestant after the Reformation had mostly swept away all well, most all of Catholicism in the kingdom. Shakespeare himself was officially a member of the Church of England, but a good number of scholars believe he might have been a secret Catholic at heart, be it critical, symbolic, or a treatise on saints or renouncing of dogma. Religion is a core element of the scene's lyrical content. Whether it's in the apocalyptic wars of Marrow of Man's debut, the reflection on spirituality in the works of liturgy, or the playing with an ultimate rejection of Catholicism in the works of Seth, religion, in a large part, dominated the scene's lyrics for decades now. But it is not just Christian religion that makes an appearance. Agriculture, in my opinion, one of the most interesting bands of the last years, have written a song about God intervening in a woman's plight to provide her child with water in lyrics shared between two songs. And those songs are The Well and Luke Part 1.
A mother reaching out with a tiny mouth. I can't just watch the boy die. All alone, both of us crying, saying it's wet. There's two little salty piles.
A mother reaching out with a tiny mouth. I can't just watch the boy die, all alone and both of us crying. The sand gets wet. There's two little salty piles, mother and child alone. Then God reaching out with mighty hands. The well was always there. Fill the skin and give the boy a drink. Let the sands get wet. There's always plenty of water. Mother and the child. This story has a striking resemblance to that of Hajar, a famous telling in the Quran in which her interactions with God led to the discovery of the Zamzam well in Mecca. But agriculture has more than one surprise up their sleeves, as their song Being Eaten by a Tiger tells us the story of how Buddha sacrificed his body to a tiger and her cubs to save them from starvation. But since that song, no matter how amazing, is not a black metal track, I will leave it for you to find for yourself. Stepping away from Satanism, religiosity, and depression, for now I want to talk about something else that holds true for the scene for the most part. Lyrical consistency. Often bands approach the creation of albums with a clear vision of its content, whether it's Kanonenfieber looking towards the horrors of the First World War in all their projects, or Fluisteraars delving into the history of castles lost to time in a series of EPs, or Ada focusing on mountaineers of old on their stellar 2025 album Eiger. A lot, if not most black metal albums, appear to have a consistent through line, delivering not just a collection of songs, but a complete work on a specific theme. And of those themes, there's one that takes a lot of guts in a scene built on hatred. That theme is love. It's my lady. Oh, it's my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars, as daylight doth a lamp. Her eye in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch her cheek. We were discussing Shakespeare. Of course, Romeo and Juliet would make an appearance, guys. Come on. Seen by many as the most romantic story ever told, I myself and a number of others with way more insight than I do hold it to be something different altogether. If you truly look at the play and its timeline, then it becomes clear to me that the Bard was using the story of the Capulets and the Montagues to warn against acting impulsively upon emotions. If you remember that the time between the two kids meeting and their death is just 4 days, that should become painfully obvious. The play is a tragedy, and the end of its protagonist should be a clear indication of this. Rose petals white, covering the pavement of my garden in the night. Flowers faded. Mirrors keep silent, can't see my reflection. Carefully reminds me of my imperfection. Wounded by the thorns, painfully embracing the flowers that are meant to speak for me. Love is left unspoken. Love no longer matters. Left unsheltered, trampled by eternity. Musically, Kek Tarak harkens back to the early sound of Burzum and Judas Iscariot. The Ukrainian one-man band consisting of Dmitry Marchenko released its masterpiece Pale Swordsman in 2021. An album that can be described as romantic, melancholic and, yes, vampiric. Its lyrics deal with the titular character and his journey through despair. Longing and resignation, living as an undead creature of the night without ever entering the realm of horror or pastiche. Album closer Swordsman, an actual piano ballad, sees the protagonist redeem himself and let go of evil in an embrace of love, in what is both an extremely unlikely as well as perfectly fitting ending to an almost perfect album that has been instrumental in getting me hooked on melodic black metal. Another example of a conceptually strong project that is close to my heart deals with another form of love, motherly love and mourning. The living land of oppression and despair, surrounded by the eyes of serpents, the lake where they gathered all the innocents in the name of pride and freedom, a Melador in the dawn of cleansing, the burning sunbeams upon the open wounds, eroded by the remorseless pain and agony, through relentless glare of tyrant, woeful hearts embraced by failing tears, years of silence brought to an end. Pure Wrath deals with a mother surviving the mass killings in Indonesia of the mid-60s of the last century. It tells the story of her half-century of life after the genocidal killings in which her son was first abducted, then tortured, and then beheaded. It deals with pain and suffering and uses the mother figure as a metaphor for the ordeals of a nation that is still reeling from these events. And this one hit home for me for a number of reasons. As you well know by now, I'm Dutch, and The Dutch messed up Indonesia in a period of colonial greed that should shame us to our core, yet we keep celebrating our so-called East India Company mentality. And then when we left, we did so in the worst possible way, leaving the entire country in turmoil, which soon turned to violence towards communists, meaning mostly people with a Chinese last name. My late father-in-law was one of those people. Though a young boy at the time, he had to flee in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind after his uncle was murdered. The family got on a ship to the Netherlands with only the clothes they were wearing and had to rebuild their entire lives here. It is a shameful piece of history that Pure Wrath's frontman and multi-instrumentalist Januaro Rio deals with eloquently and ruthlessly at the same time. It's a seminal work that stands out as much because of its intense poetry, as well as its beautiful yet loud songwriting. And the atrocities of conflicts are an essential part of black metal's writings, like they have been for centuries before. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. Over thy wounds now do I prophesy, which like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of man. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar, that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deeds, and Caesar's spirit ranging for revenge, which hath by his side come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth, with carrion man groaning for burial. With these words does Mark Anthony herald the coming war that will ensue upon the assassination of Julius Caesar. The conflict itself in the real world led to a total of 40,000 deaths, which was huge for wars at the time, and in the end, Antony's forces defeated those of Cassius and Brutus, both of whom committed suicide. This is but one of many examples of warfare, or the direct consequences of war, taking center stage in Shakespeare's work, as it does too in, for example, Henry IV, Henry V, Macbeth, Much Ado About Nothing, Hamlet, etc., etc. War or its outcomes are too an ever-recurring component in black metal, and a lot of bands have leaned into this topic with full abandon. Marduk comes to mind, but they do tend to cross the line into full-blown worship a bit too often, so I'd rather focus on bands like Kanonenfieber, Minenwerfer, 1914 or Panzerfaust. Now I'm sure that we will dive into these a lot deeper when we discuss them in one of our theme episodes, but when it comes to lyrical content, I do want to go into that last band's output for a bit right here. To Flanders, where the pipers played the song of Caber Fit. To Flanders in joyful march. To Flanders, here we were the man of no man's land. To Flanders, where war was changed forever. To Somme, to Ypres, to Passchendaele. For 1,000 days we wore the mark of Cain. We banned our sorrow again on the bloody fields of Flanders. We were the man of no man's land. This song serenades the men of the CEF, short for the Canadian Expeditionary Force, as they fought the German army in the Second Battle of Ypres in Flanders in Belgium. Among these soldiers was Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, and he is mostly remembered as a poet today. His poem, In Flanders Field, is quoted verbatim in the lyrics of the song, and it is perhaps the most famous of all poems about war, and it was written in the trenches, among the dead and maimed, while chlorine gas laid waste to the innards of man. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. I guess it's not strange that it is Panzerfaust who took upon the banner of the plight of McCrae and his fellow soldiers, as the band is Canadian, and that poem is about as important to their culture as maple syrup, political correctness and curling. Of course, the terrors of war make for excellent black metal fodder. But Panzerfaust treat the topic with respect and reverence, and I'm here for it. Okay, for something a little more lighthearted then? It is the cause, my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars. It is the cause, yet I'll not shed her blood, nor scar that white skin of hers than snow, and smooth as monumental alabaster. Yet she must die, else she would betray more men. Put out the light and then put out the light. If I quench thee, thou flaming minister, I can again thy former light restore. Should I repent me, but once put out thy light, thou cunningest pattern of excelling nature? I know not where it is, that Promethean heat, that can thy light relume. When I have plucked the rose, I cannot give it vital growth again. It needs must wither. I'll smell it on the tree. O balmy breath, that dost almost persuade justice to break her sword. William Shakespeare was not the first to employ soliloquies to share his character's inner feelings, but he mastered it better than anyone else to come before him. In this example, Othello expresses his thoughts by vocalizing them on stage, expressing to being torn between love and jealousy while contemplating killing Desdemona. And a lot of his plays have the characters expressing their feelings often as eloquently as only Shakespeare could have written them down, yet always in a voice befitting the one uttering the words. Okay, that was neither lighthearted, nor will this have left everyone listening to this episode who started with it. Because Death Heaven is a controversial band to discuss on a black metal podcast. Perhaps more so than the host of murderers, neo-Nazis, and wife-beaters who we have discussed already. And the reason being is that they were once considered, wait for it, almost there, hipsters. They were reviewed favorably by Pitchfork, and were even nominated for a Grammy. The horror. Death Heaven play a form of metal that is often called black gaze, although I don't believe this song fits that label as much as other songs of theirs do. Luna, the song we just heard, deals with something as banal as moving from one town to another and the feelings of disappointment with the results. It is introspection, and that is, of course, also something that is often missing from other black metal lyrics. Tricked into some fodder about this oasis, this conversation of new beginning, having enlightening talks over common interests, chained together to push onto the celebrated platform. Chained together or chained forever? Chained together to push onto the celebrated platform tonight. I've boarded myself inside. I've refused to exit. There is no ocean for me, there is no glamour. Only the mirage of water ascending from the asphalt, and I gaze at it from the oven of my home. Not weird that this band is popular, if you ask me. It is also not weird that they are considered outside the scene by others. Death Heaven is different. They write songs about people living in expensive homes that the band members will never be able to afford. They talk about family dynamics or about the feelings of failure. They look at life at a personal scale and sing about just that. So no, there are no portals to hell and demons escaping to our realm. There are no epic adventures on horseback in far-flung lands. There is, however, a focus on relatable experiences and finding beauty in the banal and the personal. Lyrics have always been important for my enjoyment of music, but the black metal scene is different. For one, it takes an actual and often hard effort to ever find out what the lyrics are. It is at times close to or actually impossible to understand the words through listening only, and it's often very hard to find the lyrics written down. Even the website genius.com, which was an important tool for this episode, has a very small selection of available lyrics in this genre, and some bands actively oppose the reprinting of their poetic output. Other bands I've reached out to were sometimes reluctant to share the words to their songs, wanting to keep as much mystery to their tracks as possible. I'm looking at you here, Anti-God Hand and Goods for Lot. I still love both of you. In a way, this opposition to sharing lyrics puts a larger emphasis on their value. At least it does to me, frustrating though it may be. They are regarded as intimate and personal, and they require an effort of interpretation that is missing from most other types of music, save perhaps death metal. Having them easily attainable might make them less magical, mystical, or mysterious. You can listen to them, but you might never understand. And that is the one thing I have no Shakespearean equivalent for. At least, not today. So, here are the liner notes. In preparation for this episode, I reread parts of Hamlet, The Tragedy of Macbeth, Othello, Julius Caesar, Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2, The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, and The Life of Henry V. Shakespeare's works are not an easy read, but they are worth the effort for those looking to be baffled, entertained, scared, scarred, and bewildered. There's a reason why his works are still considered essential and have been so for decades. As the works are available for free online or can be bought for next to nothing in PDF or even printed format, it is, in my opinion, worth to give it a shot. There are many sites that give you the opportunity to read a modern text alongside the ancient prose, and I assure you that this is not always just a luxury, but can be essential for understanding the words of the bard. Language changes from year to year, from decade to decade, and from century to century, so imagine how it changed in 4. A number of websites that we highly recommend for this, well, not a number of websites, let's just stick to the best one, the Shakespeare Library on vulture.edu. It is exhaustive, it has tons of background information and interesting articles and side notes to boot. For more information on John McCrae and his poetry, we read In Flanders Fields and Other Poems, which is available for free on the Project Gutenberg website. We have used the snippets of music in this episode on a fair use basis and have included them as a way of explaining the music that fueled the story, and we have no financial incentives in sharing the snippets as such. Our theme music is performed by Spectral Wound and is used with their permission. If you would like to hear more from them, look for the only band called Spectral Wound wherever you get your music, or visit their Bandcamp page and buy some of their amazing merchandise. This podcast was written and recorded by me, Danny van Eyck. Audio engineering and production by Mick Schouten, technical assistance, editing, encouraging words, a metric ton of cigarette smoke, complaining about a twisted knee and a broken jaw, all while sporting a brand new smile and a man bun, came from Björn Bolderdijk. We are on Instagram as Blackfold Podcast, all one word, so give us a follow and share your feedback in the comments if you want to. Join us for episode 9 soon. This song serenades the men of the CEF, short for the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Motherfucker.